Hello, everyone. Tonight we are descending into a place where even nightmares lose their bearings. You stand at the lip of a cavern entrance, the sunlight behind you already a memory. Before you, darkness like spilled ink, swallowing soundlight, even logic. The air tastes metallic, moisture clings to your eyelashes. Your flashlight flickers, and for a second you're certain something moved, no, slithered, just beyond reach. You lean forward anyway. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is over there. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. You shuffle into the cave mouth slowly, feet crunching over broken limestone. The warmth of the surface world drains from your skin, leaving you with goosebumps and second thoughts. You want to turn back, but you don't. Because something ancient lives down here, or lived? Maybe. These were not ordinary caves. Imagine a whole subterranean world hundreds of miles long carved out over millennia by water and gas and pressure. The kind of place that never saw the sun not once, not even by accident. No moss, no moonlight. Just dripping stone, echoing voids, and the occasional sulfur puff that makes your sinuses stink. This was the empire of the blind lizard, one of nature's strangest experiments in ruling a kingdom of silence. Geologists call this formation the Black Maze. It coils beneath what's now a crumpled mountain range, one that looks like someone dragged their fingers through soft clay. But millions of years ago, it was an inland sea. And when that sea receded, water chewed tunnels into its belly like a rat in rotting cheese. In those tunnels, life hung on. Not because it was easy, but because it was impossible. One life form in particular made this place its fortress. A reptile small at first, with eyes that didn't quite work. Generations passed. The pupils shrank, the sockets shriveled. Until one day there were none, eyeless, entirely. But that didn't mean helpless. You see, in evolutionary terms, blindness is only a weakness when there's light. Down here, it was an upgrade. These lizards, let's call them Tenebrosaurus. For now, the shadow lizard grew long, delicate sensory filaments along their flanks. Picture a salamander crossed with a centipede dipped in obsidian oil gliding silently across stone. Their tongues flicked the air constantly, tasting everything pools fungi bat guano your footprints. They felt tremors in the cave floor with a precision that would make seismologists blush. Historians still debate whether Tenebrosaurus ever left the cave system or if it was born there in its eyeless state. Some argue its ancestors were surface lizards who gradually retreated deeper century by century. Others insist this was a species forged entirely in the dark, with no outside lineage to speak of an evolutionary ghost story. What isn't debated is the fossil record, what little of it exists. Their remains are rare and oddly preserved. In one cave discovered by a Romanian spelunker named Ionel, who reportedly went missing after the find, a set of curved ribs was found arranged like someone had tried to hug a stalagmite. No skull, just a suggestion of body half-turned in eternal sleep. Another specimen was recovered near a geothermal vent embedded in what used to be a mineral pool. Its bones had turned silvery, almost chrome-like. Forensics teams couldn't agree on whether it was petrified or electroplated. Either way, it made the cover of Science for about 4 minutes before being pulled without explanation. Weird. And then there's the whispers. Okay, fine, not actual voices. But explorers have recorded strange sounds, deep in the black maze, clicks, hisses, scraping patterns on rock too rhythmic for wind, too intentional for dripping water. Some say it's just tectonic stress, others not so sure. Remember when humans evolved to fear what they couldn't see? Caves like this are why. Odd fact for the night. There's a species of beetle in Slovenia that's been living in caves for so long, it doesn't just lack eyes, it never develops eye cells. Not even as an embryo. Nature is full of creatures that choose darkness over light, voluntarily, or maybe stubbornly. You step deeper into the cave now. Your flashlight has started to fade again, but this time you don't notice right away. Your ears are doing most of the work. You hear your own breath bounce back at you in uneven rhythms. Some ancient slime maybe plops into a puddle near your boot. You don't flinch. You're learning. And then, for just a moment, the air shifts. It's like something inhaled. No breeze, no pressure, just an absence. You freeze. The lizards once moved like that soundless patient. They didn't rely on speed. Their prey didn't even know it was prey until it was halfway digested. Think of them like organic traps. Nothing they did was rushed. You didn't scream in these caves because nothing sudden ever happened. It just happened. There's a kind of dread that builds when you can't see, but you can feel something else seeing you, even if it has no eyes. That's the kingdom you've entered. And what ruled here didn't need a crown. It just needed silence, moisture, and time. You don't remember when the ceiling disappeared. The cave's low passages had pressed around you like a throat, forcing you to duck, scrape your shoulders, and flatten yourself through cracks. But now it's gone. The space above you rises into a blackness so complete, your flashlight beam simply dissolves into it. No reflection, no hint of a wall, just an abyss that could be 10 feet tall or 1,000. This was where Tenebrosaurus was born, or at least what it became. Not in a sudden miracle, but through slow, stubborn change. 100,000 generations mulled over the decision to give up sight. You probably would have resisted. Most creatures would. But vision is expensive. Eyeballs require protection, constant lubrication, a steady nerve supply, and processing power. None of that is worth the price in a world that never offers light. So evolution made an executive decision: cut the budget. Instead, invest in other things like skin so sensitive it can feel air currents, or tongues that taste hormones in the water like words in a book. As the lizards adapted, their skin changed too. It thickened, but not like a crocodile's armor. It became velvety, almost fuzzy, like peach skin soaked in cave mist, perfect for trapping moisture and sensing even the faintest of tremors. Their color, irrelevant. But if you could see them, they would have shimmered with cave minerals, blues and purples, and oily greens leached from ancient water veins. And their bones, well, that's where things get weird. Unlike most reptiles, these lizards developed spongy, porous bones that could store nutrients like a second liver. That meant they could go months, maybe years, between meals. Think about that hibernating in a standing position, mouth slightly ajar, like a gargoyle mid-bite. Historians still debate whether these creatures were warm or cold-blooded. Some argue their metabolic flexibility suggests a kind of partial endothermy, something like what we see in certain sharks or tuna. Others believe they were cold-blooded to the extreme, letting their body temperature match the cave's unchanging chill, moving only when the geothermal vents pulsed with fresh heat. The hatchlings, meanwhile, were something else entirely. Smaller than a newt, almost clear. They hatched from leathery eggs tucked under warm crevices, often next to sulfuric pools or rotting biofilm mats. And they didn't wander far. Without eyes to guide them, baby Tenebrosaurus followed scent trails laid down by their parents. Yes, parents plural. There's good evidence they raised their young communally, or maybe just tolerated them longer than expected, which in the reptile world is practically a PTA meeting. By the time they reached adolescence, they were already miniature ghosts of their adult form, long limbs, tapering snouts, stubby ridges where eye sockets once were. Their world was all texture and scent and low-frequency vibration. One scientist described it as a ballet of mucus and touch. He later retired and became a beekeeper. Odd fact for the night. There's a fish in the Amazon basin that can survive up to 4 years buried in mud with no food. It shuts itself down entirely, heart rate, digestion, the works. Something about Tenebrosaurus feels like that. A creature not designed to live in the conventional sense but to wait. Eternally, you inch forward, holding your breath as if even breathing too loud might summon something. Your foot catches on a bump. You shine your light down and immediately wish you hadn't. It's a scale, huge, embedded in the rock like a thumbprint on clay. The edges shimmer faintly with calcite. You kneel, touch it. It's not cold, which makes no sense. Nothing down here should hold heat, not unless it's alive, or was very recently. Now you're listening for more than drips. You're listening for breath, yours, and something else's. The walls here are slick with mineral slime trailing down into trenches where things probably fed or slept. You pass by one depression in the rock no bigger than a coffin lid and feel an irrational urge to look inside. You don't. Smart. Some instincts still work. Overhead, the ceiling drips. You think of stalactites forming from minerals dragged down over millennia. Water has patience. So did Tenebrosaurus. It didn't sprint. It waited. You imagine it curled like a ribbon across a stone shelf, unmoving for days, weeks, listening. What did it think, you wonder? Not in words, but in instincts. Did it dream in scent and warmth? Maybe it sensed the surface world as a kind of myth. A place where things burned in the sky and shadows followed you instead of consuming you. A realm of blindness in reverse. Some cultures have myths about underworld beasts that guide souls with no eyes. The Aztecs, for instance, believed a dog spirit named Xolotl led the dead across the 9 rivers of the afterlife. One cave painting in Slovenia depicts a serpentine creature with no face being fed by robed figures. Coincidence? Maybe. But those handprints nearby, elongated with claw-like fingers, aren't human. Historians still argue about the age of those prints. Some say Pleistocene. Others whisper older. You stop in a larger chamber. The floor here is strange gravel-like, but too soft. You kneel and pick up a piece. Bone? Tiny. Too many of them. Not human, not bat. Food remains. Sorted, arranged, like something gathered its meals here and filed the leftovers. You're not alone. You switch off your flashlight. It's a test. Also a mistake. The dark is immediate. You blink, and nothing changes. You wave your hand. Nothing. No edges, no echoes. For a few seconds you try to breathe silently, and then you hear it. A shift in pressure. The tiniest rustle. A sense of mass and motion, not near, not far, just there. You switch your light back on. Nothing. But the bones are gone. You back away slowly, your breath hitching in your throat as the flashlight wavers. You didn't hear anything leave. No skittering, no splash. But the bones are gone. Every last one. As if the chamber itself swallowed them whole while you blinked. This is how Tenebrosaurus hunted not with chase or roar, but with stillness. Its environment was its greatest ally. Down here, movement betrayed you. Sound betrayed you, but scent was everything. These creatures didn't rely on eyes. They didn't even understand the concept. Their world wasn't about seeing, it was about knowing. By tongue, by touch, by pressure. Their tongues were long forked and constantly in motion. Think of it like radar, but for chemistry. Every exhale from a prey animal, every drop of sweat, every hint of decomposing fungus became part of the map in their minds. And this map was always updating, trails blooming and fading, like fireworks in the dark. On their undersides, thousands of pressure-sensitive cells lined their bellies, each one capable of detecting the faintest tremor. A pebble knocked loose, a bat landing far away, a careless human bootstep. They didn't need to see your body. They could feel your heartbeat in the stone. And then there were the whiskers, not on their face, but along their ribs and limbs. Not hair exactly, but fine filaments, rigid and iridescent with the minerals they absorbed. These sensors twitched at every shift in air density, a breeze from an opening, the change in temperature from a torch. Even your fear if it made you sweat was something they could taste in the moisture hanging around you. Historians still debate whether Tenebrosaurus hunted alone or in loosely formed packs. Evidence suggests both. Scratch marks in parallel patterns synchronized excrement layers. Even interrupted fungal regrowth hint at cooperative movement. But then again, that could just be overlapping territories. Or worse, ritual stalking. Odd fact for the night. There's a species of cave-dwelling planthopper in Vietnam that doesn't just sense vibrations, it communicates with them through its knees. Seriously, if insects can talk by leg tapping in the dark, it's not far-fetched to imagine a reptile doing something similar, albeit with more teeth and far less charm. You edge toward a side tunnel, now trying not to breathe too loud. Your flashlight catches a shimmer moss number, a crust of salt deposits crusted into jagged shapes like broken glass. A dead end not quite. You duck through a lower opening barely a meter tall. It's slick with condensation. Your boots slip a little and your knee grazes the wall. Instantly the temperature drops. Not just cooler, colder. The air is so still it feels thick like walking through syrup. You instinctively hold your arms close to your sides. This place doesn't want you sprawling. It wants you folded, contained. This is where Tenebrosaurus thrived. These narrow channels were ambush corridors. Their bodies were flexible, serpentine, able to flatten against walls like shadows. The narrower the path, the greater their advantage. And if you thought being blind was a disadvantage, think again. Evolution had other ideas. Their brains rerouted the visual cortex to enhance other senses. The part of their mind that should have processed light now processed vibration. That means a lizard-blind, mute eyeless could picture a moving target in complete darkness by sensing the echo of footsteps through stone. Some of them even had chemical receptors in their tongues that could read the emotional state of another creature. Fear smells different from hunger. Curiosity has a scent. Sweat hormones, pheromones, all became data points. Down here, emotions weren't hidden. They were broadcast. You round a corner and freeze. The wall ahead of you is covered in striations, not carvings, not scratches, something different. As you approach, you realize they're trails, touch trails. A coded map possibly left behind by a lizard dragging its sensory whiskers repeatedly along the same grooves. Left for others, left for itself. No way to know, but one groove is fresh. You press your palm against it. The stone is warm, not ambient, body warm. You jerk your hand away. You're starting to realize that the real adaptation wasn't blindness, it was patience. These lizards waited longer than anything else ever dared. They didn't chase prey, they waited until prey invited itself to the kill. A cricket, a frog, a cave rat, even you. It didn't matter how fast you could run. Down here, speed just meant dying tired. Historians still debate whether the species is extinct or simply dormant. You know how hard it is to declare something gone when it lives in places humans barely understand. New species of blind spiders and translucent eels are still being discovered every year, and those don't have an entire mythos behind them. One explorer in 1978 claimed to see a ripple in the cave water long, low, and silent that left no wake, no scent, no heat. He sketched it later on a napkin. It looked like a lizard wrapped in black algae with gills. He never went back underground. You stumble now, your foot finding uneven rock, and instinctively reach out. Your hand brushes something soft. Not stone, not moss. A molted skin. It clings to the rock like plastic wrap, translucent and full of tiny, sharp ridges. You shine your light on it. The outline is unmistakable. A long torso, tiny vestigial limbs, a head with no eyes, and a jawline that curves like a scythe. It's almost elegant. Almost. You don't move, you can't. Because a freshly shed skin means one thing: the creature that wore it is nearby. Still warm. Still flexing into its new shape. You remember the groove in the wall, the warmth in the stone, the missing bones, the clicking echo behind you that's no longer echoing. And now you realize the air's changed again. You're being tasted. You freeze mid-step, your breath snagged in your throat like a leaf caught in a drain. It's not fear yet. It's uncertainty. And down here, that's so much worse. You try to tell yourself the taste in the air is just sulfur, metallic, bitter. But deep down, you know better. You're being sampled, assessed, not as a threat, not even as a curiosity, just as a possibility. The blind lizard's hunting style wasn't aggressive. It was methodical, surgical. Imagine something that's waited 2 years without eating. Not because it was starving, but because it could afford to. Its entire body worked like a sleepwalking predator. Muscles locked in slow tension, jaw barely parted. Everything about it was silent endurance. When prey entered its range, it didn't lunge. It shifted, just enough to be closer, just enough to recalculate its map of scents and pulses. It might take hours, a full night, but eventually the prey would come within reach. The kill itself. Quick in theory. It wasn't about power, it was about accuracy. The lizard's jaws could open wide enough to encircle a small mammal. Rows of backward-facing teeth ensured that once something entered, it didn't leave. The initial bite paralyzed not with venom but with crushing pressure, something like a hydraulic press made of bone. The prey died quietly, often without realizing it had been caught. Odd fact for the night. There's a species of cone snail that fires venom-tipped harpoons into fish at lightning speed. The fish are paralyzed so fast they keep swimming on reflex for several seconds, already dead but unaware. That's the kind of elegance Tenebrosaurus might have possessed. Kill first, let the rest catch up. And the lizard didn't always eat right away, it might let its prey settle. Panic in place. It may have even enjoyed it if such a word applies. Not sadism, just curiosity, a habit of watching life end, slowly. Historians still debate whether these lizards truly had brains capable of emotion. Their skulls. What little we've found show a surprisingly large olfactory bulb and a modest but well-developed cerebrum. Could they learn? Almost certainly. Remember? Probably. But feel? That's the part that makes paleontologists uncomfortable. Because if they did, then we weren't just being hunted, we were being understood. Back in the cave, your flashlight dims again. You give it a shake, just superstition, you know. Batteries don't care if you rattle them, but still it flares one last time, illuminating something ahead. A carcass. Well, the remains of one. It looks like a goat. Or part of one. Hard to tell. Skin desiccated into papery folds. Bones cracked from within. No obvious wounds, just a hollowed torso, like the meat had been drawn out without disturbing the outside. You crouch and notice something else. It's positioned strangely. Too clean. No signs of a struggle. No drag marks. Whatever killed it placed it here. Now that's unsettling. Tenebrosaurus was never known for hoarding, but then again, we don't know much at all. Maybe it collected certain kills. Maybe it used them as scent bait. Or warnings. A way of saying I'm still here. You move past the carcass with slow reverence, as if disturbing it might break whatever fragile rule you've just obeyed by accident. Up ahead, the tunnel widens again. This time into a vertical shaft plunging down in a spiral like a drain for forgotten things. The walls are wet with something that isn't water. You shine your light. It's slick with mucus sheen. Recent. This is a hunting chute. Geologists think some of these vertical shafts formed from collapsing lava tubes. Others were likely sinkholes sealed from the surface, but to the lizards, they were perfect kill zones. Prey would fall or wander in, unable to climb the glassy rock. The lizards would wait at the bottom or the top. It didn't matter. Gravity did the work. You can't help yourself. You throw a pebble down. It clinks, echoes, then silence. Then something clicks back. A single deliberate sound, like bone tapping stone. You don't move. Historians still debate whether the cave systems changed because of the lizards or despite them. In some collapsed zones, there are signs of deliberate erosion claw marks and parallel lines, stone polished by repeated slithering bodies. It's possible the creatures altered their own habitat over time, like beavers but with fewer hugs and way more doom. You step back from the shaft, letting its breathy cold wash over you. You're not falling for that, not tonight. But now you're thinking about those long, slow hunts, the waiting, the patience. What if one's been following you since the entrance, not stalking, just shadowing? Because if you panic, you'll run. And if you run, you'll fall. And if you fall, well, you saw the goat. Oddly, this is where you start to feel calmer, because you finally understand the rules. Don't speak, don't hurry, don't sweat if you can help it. The lizards don't chase, they shepherd. You retrace your steps with deliberate care, every boot step placed with quiet intention. The molted skin, the bone pit, the groove on the wall. You're building your own mental map now. A survival sketch. You remember the whispers of explorers who disappeared down here? Not by accident. They vanished. No distress signals, no signs of struggle, just a rope tied to nothing. A half-written notebook. A last photograph showing a shadow with the wrong number of limbs. You exhale slowly. Let the air escape your lungs in a hiss. In the dark behind you, something hisses back. You don't turn around. Turning would imply you need to know what's behind you, but you already do. You feel it less like an object and more like a pressure, like the weight of a thought you didn't think. It's not chasing you. It's synchronizing, matching your rhythm. If you were to step faster, it would too. But if you stopped, then things might get personal. This is the part where most animals would bolt. Rabbits, deer, humans. Our first instinct is to flee when the unknown creeps too close. But remember, Tenebrosaurus didn't rely on eyesight. It hunted by tracking motion and vibration, and the more erratically you moved, the more data you gave it. You stay still, breathe shallow, and listen. There's a silence in this place that makes your ears ring. You know that sound. The high-pitched hum your brain fills in when the world gets too quiet. Down here, it's amplified. It's the only thing keeping you grounded. But even that's not enough. The cave takes sound and stretches it, twists it, folds it back in on itself. This silence, it's not passive, it's predatory. And Tenebrosaurus used it like a weapon. It knew how long to wait between movements, how to let its vibrations settle into the stone, how to blur itself into background noise. If you didn't already know it was there, you never would. It was the ultimate ghost. Not because it was supernatural, but because it mastered the math of stillness. Historians still debate whether this creature was coldly calculating or simply wired for quiet. One group argues that it had no real intelligence, only an exquisite series of instincts, tuned to a razor's edge. Others believe it had a form of proto-strategy, a slow-burning awareness of its environment and how to manipulate it. One paleobiologist described its behavior as almost theatrical. It didn't just hunt, it performed. A slow reveal, a dramatic pause. The final act, always ending with one thing vanishing and the lizard waiting for applause that never came. Odd fact for the night. There's a kind of spider that plays dead for hours to lure flies close enough to grab. Just lies there, legs up, like it died mid-yoga, and it works. Tenebrosaurus probably didn't do yoga, but it definitely weaponized stillness. You take another step forward carefully and feel the air shift again. It's not a breeze, it's breath. Exhaled from a massive set of lungs somewhere out of sight. Long, measured, like it's matching yours again. So you change it up. You stop breathing, and in the next second, so does it. That's when you know. It's not just hunting you, it's learning you, mapping every choice you make, every hesitation, every time your heart rate shifts or your soles squeak against wet rock. You're not prey, you're a puzzle. and it's almost solved. You shuffle sideways into a narrower tunnel, hoping the squeeze will slow whatever's tailing you. The stone brushes your shoulders. Water drips onto your neck. You keep your arms close, your flashlight angled downward. The floor here is smoother unnaturally, so like it's been worn down by passage. Not water, not erosion, footfalls, many of them, and recent. Because the slime is still wet. You realize this could be a migration path. If Tenebrosaurus ever moved in numbers, this is where it happened. Not a stampede, not a parade, just slow, steady traffic. Like a current beneath the world. And then you hear something unexpected, a chirp. Tiny, musical, almost hopeful. It repeats. Once, then again, 3 soft calls. You follow it because you're human and you can't help yourself. And after a dozen steps, you find the source. A tiny frog, translucent. Its heart visible in its chest like a blinking ruby. It sits calmly on a ledge throat, pulsing eyes huge and milk white. A cave specialist. One of the few living things that still calls this darkness home. You exhale relieved. Not because of the frog, but because where there's a frog, there's less chance of a lizard. Right? Well, not exactly. Because frogs are prey, and this one is bait. Before you can back away, the ledge beneath the frog shifts. Not collapses, shifts, like it's alive. Your flashlight flickers, catches on the curve of a mouth, then dies completely. Not with a whimper, but with a little pop. Battery gone. As if the cave had decided, that's enough light now. You don't scream, you don't run, you just listen. And in the dark, you hear a soft scraping like claws folding back into sockets. Then a second chirp. Closer. That one wasn't the frog. Historians still debate whether these lizards could mimic sounds. One cave record from the 1960s picked up what sounded like human whispering. The researchers thought it was interference until the whispers started to copy the lead explorers' breathing patterns. 2 weeks later, the entire team left the project. The silence deepens. You're not sure how long you've stood there. Minutes, hours. The frog is gone. No splash, no jump, just not there. You feel the lizard pass by you. Not touch you, not grab you. Just move, like a thought crossing your mind. And then it's gone. You're left with the awful understanding that you were never in control. From the moment you entered the cave, your path was part of something else's rhythm. You danced the steps it expected, and it let you live. This time, you emerge into a new chamber, knees sore, lungs dry, and heart hammering a little too loud. It's bigger than the others, so wide, your flashlight beam when it last worked wouldn't have reached the edges. But now you're relying on the subtle changes in air pressure, the feel of stone beneath your fingers, and the occasional dripping sounds that tell you the cave is watching. You pause, you listen, and you try to remember why you came down here in the first place. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe something worse like the need to prove there's nothing here. Either way, you were wrong. This chamber feels different. The silence is deeper. Not just the absence of sound, but the absence of life. The walls are dry and the air is colder than any part of the cave you've passed through. A kind of stillness that suggests you're not the intruder anymore. You're just not welcome. A pile of stones catches your attention. Not a natural formation, not random. A cairn, ancient, crude, but deliberate. And beside it, a rusted buckle, human. Leather long since rotted away. The metal is curled and bent like it had been chewed. Now, let's talk about the humans who came down here before you. Because they did. From time to time over the centuries, someone would descend into these caves. Hunters, mystics, fools, or those with nowhere left to go. Sometimes they carved symbols into the walls, primitive runes, circular spirals, open palms. One such set of marks appears again now to your right. 5 lines like tally marks, each one ending in a slight hook. Not scratches, not art. A warning, perhaps. Historians still debate whether early humans ever coexisted with Tenebrosaurus. There's no direct evidence of interaction. No clean bite marks, no obvious traps. But in the margins of ancient cave art, you sometimes see figures that don't fit snake-like bodies, long limbs, no faces, always in the shadows, never at the center, like they were seen, but not acknowledged. One site in France bears the faded image of a creature coiled in on itself as if sleeping. Around it painted handprints, many of them missing fingers. The prevailing theory is frostbite or ritual. But another theory. Something took the fingers. Odd fact for the night. In ancient Finland, people believed that if you ventured too deep into the earth, you could awaken blind spirits, creatures of touch and darkness who guided the dead to their rest. They were said to live in silence and punished anyone who made noise in their tunnels. You wonder if the legend started in a cave like this one. You shine your backup light. It's weak, half aglow, but enough to make out more cairns. Not one, not two, dozens, arranged in strange concentric patterns. Who built them and why? You crouch inspecting the stones. Some are etched, some are warm. Not body warm, but memory warm. Like they once carried heat and haven't quite let it go. The buckle wasn't the only human trace. Farther along, a torn backpack, rotted canvas, a cracked lens. What looks like part of a journal, pages fused together by moisture. You don't dare open it. Instead, you scan the floor and realize what you're standing on. Not gravel, not soil, skulls, small, crushed. Rodents, birds, maybe a few monkeys, long dead, long dry, arranged loosely like they were discarded after feeding. A lizard's trash heap spread out over 1,000 years. You step carefully, not out of fear, out of respect. The lizard didn't hate humans. Hate requires intention. Emotion. Tenebrosaurus wasn't angry. It wasn't cruel. It was indifferent. You were just another moving thing in the dark. And yet, humans didn't keep away. In fact, stories of the cave spread across oral traditions. In Bulgaria, there's an old tale of a mother below a thing that weeps in caves to lure men downward. In that story, she has no eyes, just long fingers and a scent of sulfur. Sound familiar? You sit now, back to the wall, flashlight dimming again. The cave is huge. You could yell and not reach the far side, but you don't. You know better. Every sound you make is an offering. So instead you think about how the cave reshaped life. Not just physically, psychologically. The lizard never needed vision. Its body evolved for this silence. Its mind adapted to long waits. But humans, we rely on movement, voices, sunrises. Down here, we unravel. That's what early explorers didn't understand. They thought survival meant finding food or shelter. But really, it meant outweighting the darkness, letting it crawl over your skin until it accepted you as part of the background. Some did it, some didn't. The lucky ones died fast. The unlucky ones learned to crawl, to echo, to mimic. And maybe that's the worst idea of all. Because now you're wondering if everything that lives down here started as a lizard. And if maybe, just maybe not, everything that lives down here still is. Section 7. The path narrows again, if you can even call it a path. It's less of a route and more of an agreement between the stone and your desperate will to keep going. You twist sideways, scraping against wet limestone. Your backpack snags on a jagged edge and tears. You don't stop to inspect it, not because you don't care, but because you've just noticed something more important. The air has changed again. Not colder, not warmer, thinner. You kneel, cupping your hand near the floor. The draft is steady, faint, and oddly rhythmic, like breath but from the cave itself, and coming from below. Of course, the lizards were cold-blooded. Their metabolism needed regulation. So they moved with the Earth's heat, sinking lower during cool seasons, rising when vents ran hot. But in this place, the geothermal patterns were unpredictable. Toxic pools, shifting sulfur vents. The caves demanded adaptation. And that's how Tenebrosaurus became king of nowhere. No predators dared enter these depths. Not just because of the dark, but because of the air. sulfur, carbon dioxide, even arsenic in some pockets. For anything with lungs that meant caution, for the lizards that meant dominance. They developed a tolerance, maybe even a dependency for certain minerals. There's a theory that their digestion worked more like a chemical lab than a stomach. Microbial partners helped them break down food that would poison anything else, including you. Odd fact for the night. In Indonesia, there's a cave full of hydrogen sulfide gas, so deadly that birds die mid-flight just above it. And yet bacteria thrive inside, feeding on the very poison that kills everything else. Nature loves contradiction. You follow the draft downward into a chamber that smells like scorched pennies and wet eggs. A smell your instincts tell you to avoid, but you keep going because this was the throne room, not in any architectural sense, but in the way the stone yields into a bowl-shaped cavern with elevated ledges all around. Natural balconies perfectly sized for something long-bodied to coil around and watch. This is where the lizard ruled, not ruled like a lion, not with strength or ceremony, but with presence. It never had to fight for power. It simply existed where no one else could. That was enough. Historians still debate whether any other creatures evolved alongside it. A few fossil fragments suggest a strange ecosystem fungus that glowed faintly, eyeless crabs, even a species of snail with barbed shells, but all of them were secondary. This cave wasn't a democracy, it was a single animal kingdom. The ground in the center bears strange circular patterns. Not carved, not eroded, something scoured them, as if a massive tail curled and uncurled over and over for years. A throne worn into stone by the body of a lizard too large to move often and too patient to need to. You step into the circle. The air here is different again, heavier. Not dangerous, but dense, as though memories have weight. There's no sign of the lizard. But you know better. It doesn't leave signs. You kneel beside one of the grooves and run your hand along it. It's warm, not hot, not recent, but not dead either. Odd fact for the night. In the Mariana Trench, over 10 kilometers beneath the sea, scientists found a species of amphipod that can digest plastic. It evolved in complete darkness and crushing pressure and still found a way to survive. The message: you can't assume what's impossible just because you wouldn't survive it. You scan the ledges around you. In the faint light, you can make out shapes. At first, they look like rocks, but they're too smooth, too uniform. Shells, eggs. You squint. No, not eggs. Skulls. Polished, arranged, lined up along the ledges in loose patterns. Mostly small bats, frogs, rodents, but some larger. One looks human, another like a mountain lion. Their foreheads are cracked. Feeding trophies, or something else. You don't want to know, you already do. The lizard didn't just kill, it curated. And that's how it kept control of this cave. Not through brute strength, but through fear management. The occasional skull, the sudden silence, the rearranged bones. It let the other creatures believe it was everywhere, always watching even without eyes. And in return, they stayed low, quiet, obedient, just like you're doing now. You lower yourself into the center of the bowl and lie flat. Not out of submission, just mimicry. What if the lizard only sees those who behave like prey? So for a moment, you become the stone, the cave. You try to match its stillness, and that's when you hear it. A heartbeat, not yours. Slower, stronger, deeper. It echoes from the walls, not sound, but vibration. A pulse that moves through stone like thunder through water. You press your ear to the rock. There it is again. Boom, pause. Boom, pause. Then nothing. And yet, you realize something. This place isn't abandoned. It's hibernating. Because a creature that waits centuries between meals doesn't die in silence. It rests in it. And as you climb out of the bowl, heart pounding in time with the memory of something else's beat, you whisper a quiet truth to yourself. You're not the first to come here. You might not even be the latest. And the king of nowhere, he never left. He just got better at staying still. You crawl away from the throne room, muscles aching, mouth dry, eyes struggling even with the dim light your backup lamp offers. The beam is dying. Again. You ration it now, flicking it on only when the tunnel ahead changes, when it gets too tight, too open, or too quiet. But your thoughts somehow are sharper than ever. It's like the silence is feeding you clarity. You begin to wonder who else stood here before you. Who else made it this far and left a mark? That's when you notice the walls changing. The rock here isn't just smooth. It's been worked. Not with tools, but with intent. Grooves repeated, winding, branching cover every reachable surface. They almost look like writing or a map etched into flesh. But the grooves aren't for eyes, they're textural. Meant to be touched, not seen. Remember how Tenebrosaurus navigated tongue whiskers vibration? It didn't draw pictures, it left trails. Historians still debate whether these grooves are language or territory markings. But in this place, they don't feel like warnings, they feel like stories. You reach out and trace one with your fingers. It starts as a straight line, then forks, then curves back on itself like a spiral. You don't know what it means, but your body responds anyway. Something primal, like déjà vu carved in stone. And then it happens. Your fingers find a handprint, human, small, child-sized, pressed into the wall with such force the rock seems to dent inward. You bring your light close and see it's surrounded by the same looping groove patterns. Someone stood here years, maybe centuries ago and touched the same wall. You're not alone, not in the horror sense, in the historical one. You are part of a chain of witnesses, explorers, survivors, or maybe just listeners. People who came here not to fight or escape, but to understand. Odd fact for the night. Some of the earliest cave art ever discovered, like that in El Castillo, Spain, is over 40,000 years old and consists mainly of red discs and handprints. Not animals, not scenes, just the human presence itself. Like saying I was here, I mattered. But what if some of those handprints weren't meant for us? What if they were for something else? You move deeper and the groove trails multiply. The ceiling lowers until you're nearly belly crawling. You flick the light back on and catch a strange image, a row of parallel handprints, 8 of them, each one slightly more distorted than the last. Fingers longer, palm narrower, almost jointless. At the end of the line, a single print with no fingers at all. Just a round pad like a snake's belly flattened into clay. You don't know what unnerves you more, that someone evolved to leave that print, or that someone recorded the transformation. This is the part where the academic theories collapse. Historians still debate whether Tenebrosaurus interacted with early humans. Some say the timelines don't match. Others argue that oral histories from cave cultures mention eye thieves or the smooth-bellied watchers. But no bones have ever been found in conjunction with human artifacts. Nothing definitive, until now. Because here in a side chamber barely wide enough to crouch, you find them. Paintings, not on the walls, on the ceiling. Primitive, crude, but unmistakable. Silhouettes of a long-bodied creature, mouth agape, jaws like curved shears. Around it, circles, ripples, handprints. It's not attacking, it's listening. And the humans are bowing. Not in worship, in imitation. What if our ancestors didn't just fear the lizard? What if they learned from it? Odd fact for the night. In Japan, there's a cave where monks used to meditate in complete darkness for weeks. No light, no speech, no food, just breath. They believed the silence would awaken something in the brain, something ancient, something that listened back. You can see it now. A shaman pressing his ear to the stone, hearing the heartbeat of a thing far older than language. And instead of fleeing, he chose to become more like it. You sit, legs folded, breath slow, trying to mirror the silence, and for a moment you understand the pull. It's peaceful, terrifying, like being wrapped in the arms of something that doesn't love you but also doesn't need to hurt you. It just is. And if you can match its rhythm, it will leave you alone. Or maybe it will let you stay. You rise carefully, turning back to the passage, but your foot hits something soft. You shine your light. Cloth, a jacket, mold-stained, half-decayed. The logo on the sleeve is faded but readable: Geo Survey 1982. You kneel. Inside the pocket, dry, miraculously preserved a photo. A man mid-30s smiling awkwardly at the camera in a wide-brimmed hat. Behind him, the same cave wall you just passed. You turn the photo over, one word written in pen: listening. You put it back. The lizard ruled with patience, yes. But maybe it ruled with attention too. Total, complete awareness. It didn't just kill what moved too fast. It ignored what moved with respect. And now you begin to wonder, was it truly blind? Or did it simply choose not to look? Because that's the deepest kind of fear, isn't it? Not being hunted by something angry or monstrous, but by something that sees you fully and decides you don't matter. You shuffle forward, photo still fresh in your mind, the word listening echoing louder than your own footfalls. The passage bends again, narrowing into something that feels like a throat. You run your hand along the wall. It's smoother here, less grooved, bare, even, as if the cave itself is holding its breath. And then the air changes again, drier, warmer, not by much, but enough. A faint mineral tang creeps into your nose, metallic, faintly sweet. You know this scent. Blood number iron, the kind you smell near geothermal vents, or maybe fossil beds. You take another step and then you see them. Bones, dozens, no hundreds, not scattered but assembled. They arc across the floor in loose spirals, ribs and femurs, overlapping in patterns too intricate for wind or water. You crouch down, careful not to touch. Some are tiny mice, frogs, even birds. Others are too large to identify at a glance. And some, human, a shin bone here, a fragment of skull there. All polished smooth as if licked clean and handled again and again, arranged like offerings, or worse, like furniture. You take out your last reserve light and flick it on. Weak beam, sickly yellow, but it reveals the centerpiece. A skeleton, mostly intact, sitting upright, back propped against the cave wall, knees folded to chest, hands resting in its lap. It's dressed, or was. The fabric is long gone, but rusted buttons cling to its ribs and something metallic glints near its neck. A whistle. You kneel beside it, staring at the hollow eyes. No trauma. No defensive wounds. It didn't die running. It died waiting. And that's the first real glimpse you get of what the lizards didn't do. They didn't devour everything. Some kills were curated. Others were preserved. Why? Historians still debate whether the lizard was a predator, a scavenger, or something stranger. The fossil record is sparse ribs, vertebrae, a few fragments of jaw, but nothing that clearly shows behavior. And yet in places like this cave, you begin to see its legacy, not through violence, through intent. Maybe Tenebrosaurus didn't just kill to eat. Maybe it killed to remember. You glance up and that's when you see them. Tiny alcoves lining the walls, each about the size of a skull. Carved or worn, impossible to tell, but filled one after another with bones. Not jammed, placed. Some even arranged in odd poses, skulls facing one another, long bones, crossing in X's, vertebrae forming rings. A ritual, a warning, or something far simpler. Organization. Because what if the lizard didn't just rule the cave? What if it understood it? You shift your light toward the back of the chamber and find a pile of rubble. Fresh collapse, maybe decades old, but buried beneath it, half exposed, is a fossil. Long, coiled, jaw wide, teeth like needles. It's the lizard? One of them anyway. Its eye sockets are fused over. Not hollow, just gone. The entire skull is rounded, sleek, built for a life without sight. Its spine is flexible, almost serpentine. Ribs extend sideways like scaffolding, wide enough to encircle prey whole. And yet, it's not massive. Not a dragon. Not a monster. Just a predator so perfect it didn't need to be big. Only patient. You kneel by the fossil, hand hovering near its jaw. What killed it? Old age, starvation, or maybe choice. Because there are no signs of struggle. No broken bones, no teeth marks from rivals. It simply curled up and stopped, as if it reached the end of its map. Odd fact for the night. There's a species of cicada that hibernates for 17 years underground, then emerges for a few frantic weeks of life before dying. Its entire life is built around one act of survival followed by silence. Maybe this lizard was the same. You sit beside the fossil, your light now reduced to a dull pulse. The bones around you don't scare you anymore. Not because you're brave, but because you get it now. This cave wasn't a tomb. It was a gallery. Every kill, every motion, every breathless wait, it all meant something. It was all part of an ecosystem built on memory, silence, and time. The lizard didn't need to be fast or strong or clever. It just needed to last longer than everything else. And it did. Historians still debate whether it went extinct due to climate competition or isolation. But what if it simply left not physically but spiritually? Into legend, into silence, into the grooves it carved into these walls, into the bones arranged not in chaos but in sequence, and now into you. Because let's be honest, you're not walking out the same way you came in. You've seen how the darkness moves, how it waits, how it listens, and how it remembers. Your light dies completely. You don't panic. You just breathe. And somewhere behind you the walls hum, not sound, just presence. Still, always. Here, you shuffle through pitch so thick it feels solid. Each footstep becomes a negotiation between what you remember from the path and what the stone now chooses to allow. Your hands drag along the walls, palms finding their own trail, following grooves that feel too deliberate to be random. You aren't guiding yourself anymore. The cave is. Above, something drops, not a rock, something softer. Maybe a clump of moss, maybe a cocoon. You don't look up. You've learned better. This is when you first feel the heartbeat. Not yours, not the cave's. Something slower, fainter, but steady. It comes through the floor in faint pulses, not tremors, rhythms, like tapping from a giant sleeping thing. You pause and press your hand against the rock, and there it is again. A beat every 20 seconds, then every 30, then gone. You wonder if it ever truly stopped. Because this is where the lizard's secrets changed from survival to superstition. You're in the deep now, where light dies, and time stops. This chamber smells like dust and something older like dried mushrooms and rusted copper. You kneel, running your fingers along the floor until they meet texture. Not bones, not carvings. Scales. Hundreds of them molted and left like fallen leaves. Some brittle, some fresh. A few fused into the floor like obsidian. All curved in long crescents tapering at the ends. Each one tells a story, a change in temperature, a shift in diet, a moment of stress. You've stumbled into a ledger of lives. The scales are black but reflect faint green and violet when brushed with warmth. You press one to your lips. Cold. Then warming quickly. Alive, no. But once part of something that was. Odd fact for the night. There's a species of desert lizard that changes skin color not for camouflage, but to regulate body temperature, darker when cold, lighter when hot. Nature always multitasking. You slide deeper into the chamber. The air is thick here, not foul, just dense, as if every breath must be earned. And the cave begins to change again. Now you see shapes, not shadows, not tricks of light. Actual forms carved into the stone not by erosion but by repetition. Grooves deep enough to wrap your fingers around. Spiral patterns. Loops. Interlocking arcs that form what can only be described as routes. Not roads, not rivers, but paths. Memory paths. You run your hand along one and feel a strange warmth. The trail dips and rises, widens and narrows, always deliberate. It's a tactile language. One made for a creature that never saw, only felt. Maybe this is how they mapped their world. not by eyes, but by echo and pressure. Their entire civilization, if you can call it that, written in swirls, you can only read with your body. Historians still debate whether this system of communication was accidental or intentional. Some argue the trails were byproducts of repeated travel, like deer paths. Others claim it was intentional, a shared language passed between generations through touch. In a species where sight never existed, texture became truth. You brush your fingertips along a downward spiral and feel a strange sensation almost like electricity or memory. You don't know why, but your breath catches. You stop moving. Then something shifts behind you, not loudly. Just a subtle scrape. You don't turn. Not out of fear, out of understanding. If Tenebrosaurus still lived here, it would not approach you as prey. It would approach you as a witness, maybe even an heir. Because you followed the signs, you've read the trails, you've kept still when it mattered. So now it draws closer. Slow, silent, not hunting, testing. You remain still as your senses begin to stretch outward. The pressure in the air thickens. You feel your heartbeat slowing, matching the rhythm in the floor. You imagine this is what meditation must feel like if meditation involved being examined by a creature older than your species. Then something touches your foot. Not a claw, not a tongue, a vibration, a message. You don't flinch, you wait, and then it passes. Back into the dark. Like you passed, it let you go. Why? Odd fact for the night. There's a kind of whale that sings at 52 hertz, a pitch. No other whale seems to understand. It travels the oceans alone, calling out into silence. Some call it the loneliest whale. But what if it's not lonely? What if it simply speaks a language no one else has learned? You think of the lizard now, the silence it commands, the symbols it leaves. Maybe it's not a predator. Maybe it's just alone, waiting, teaching, hoping something will understand. And tonight you did. You press your palm against the wall and whisper not words, just breath. The cave hears it. You're sure? Then you move on. Slower, calmer, knowing the silence has accepted. Us at you. Not as prey, but as another listener. You emerge from the memory chamber slower, deliberate, like you're walking out of someone else's dream. Every motion you make now feels borrowed, softened by something older than you. The stone no longer resists. It's welcoming, or perhaps it simply no longer cares to resist your presence. You pass the test. The next corridor feels different. Not wider, but calmer. The echoes don't fight each other here. They slip past your shoulders like polite guests at a wake. The air tastes like old metal and faint rot, but behind that, something sweet, fungal, decaying in the gentlest way. And then you see them, footprints, not yours, not human. Long, narrow grooves spaced in eerie measured intervals, three-toed, deeply pressed. You crouch and trace one. It's fresh. The dust hasn't even resettled. And around it, dozens of tiny scratches like antennae brushing the floor. The touch trails again, but this time they're tighter, more erratic. You're not just in the lizard's home anymore, you're in its nervous system. Historians still debate how intelligent Tenebrosaurus really was. The fossil record offers so little fragments mostly. Brain case volume suggests a modest brain no larger than a cat's. But the patterns it left, the organization of its kills, the carving of memory trails, the arrangement of its dead, those things hint at something greater. And here's the strange part. Intelligence doesn't always come in a familiar form. We expect speech tools fire. But what if intellect can exist without any of those? What if it exists in space? In how a creature moves through its world? What if this lizard thinks by walking? Odd fact for the night. There's a species of octopus that arranges coconut shells into a kind of mobile fortress. It doesn't live inside them, it carries them stacks, then hides behind them. Not because it has language, but because it has intent. You continue forward, us. The footprints disappear, but something else begins to appear on the walls now. Etchings, not grooves this time, not touch trails. Symbols, simple at first, dots, lines, arcs. Then they grow more complex spirals intersecting with loops, crosses within ovals. None of it reads as language in any human sense, but it has grammar. Flow, a logic you can almost taste. One panel catches your eye. A curved form, clearly a lizard encircled by smaller shapes. Around them, a ring of jagged lines, almost like flames. But inside the ring, peace, order, stillness. Outside chaos, the lizard, it seems, was not just a predator. It was a barrier, a warden, the thing that kept the outer dark at bay. You stare at the pattern for a long time. You've been afraid of the wrong thing, not the lizard. The absence of the lizard. The idea that it might one day stop watching. That's the real terror. The air shifts again. Not a breeze, a scent. Sulfur and something floral. Almost comforting. You know what that means. The hot springs. The geothermal vents that feed this cave system. They're close now, so close that the stone underfoot has begun to hum. Not loudly, just enough for your boots to feel lighter. You follow the vibration. It leads you into a chamber that steams at the edges. Here, stalactites drip slowly into mineral pools, milky bubbling with invisible gas. The temperature rises with every step, and then you see it. A creature, not moving, curled at the far side of the spring. You freeze. It's not fossilized. It's not molted. It's real. A Tenebrosaurus, smaller than you expected. About the size of a large dog. Limbs tucked beneath a long, muscular body. Skin black and oily, ridged with mineral deposits. Mouth slightly open. Rows of needle teeth. No eyes. And it's breathing. You don't move. You don't even think. You simply allow the moment to exist. Because this isn't a chase. This isn't a fight. It's an encounter. And the strangest part, it doesn't care that you're here. It doesn't rise, doesn't hiss, doesn't move toward you. It just rests, peacefully, as if you're part of the stone now. Another fixture, another hum in the cave's long, patient song. You crouch slowly, not to get closer, to get lower, out of respect. Because this is what ruled the cave. Not a monster, not a god, just a reptile built for darkness and silence who learned to live longer than anything else. You don't photograph it. You don't touch it. You just remember. Because that's all this creature ever wanted, to be remembered. Odd fact for the night. Some cave-dwelling salamanders have been known to live over 100 years without ever seeing daylight. One specimen in Europe stayed in the same spot for 7 years without moving. You wonder how long this lizard has rested here. 7 years, 70. You'll never know, and somehow that's okay. Because in this moment, you're not a visitor. You're a witness. And the lizard has decided you may go. You back away from the sleeping lizard knees, trembling not from fear but from awe. You're still not entirely sure what you just saw. A survivor. A relic. A remnant of evolution's darkest gamble. The truth doesn't matter. Not really. You saw it. You were allowed to see it. And more importantly, it let you leave. You move on in silence, the steam of the hot spring swirling behind you like a curtain falling on the final act of a play. Ahead, the tunnel curves upward. Slightly. Just enough that the air begins to shift. Cooler, crisper, carrying the faint, rotten egg scent of hydrogen sulfide and the metallic tang of mineralized water. You pass another pool, this one shallow and rimmed with pale green algae. The surface is still save for the occasional ripple from a drop of condensation, but beneath it, shapes, long and pale, not moving. You don't look long enough to tell if they're alive. This was the source, the sulfur springs, the lifeblood of the ecosystem. Historians still debate whether the geothermal features of these caves formed before or after Tenebrosaurus took up residence. Some believe the hot springs were what drew its ancestors underground in the first place, a refuge from surface predators, cold weather, and the blazing sun. Others think the springs followed reshaping the terrain to suit the creature already adapting to silence and stillness. Either way, one thing is certain: Tenebrosaurus needed these pools, not to swim, to breathe. You crouch beside a vent and press your hand over the rising mist. It burns slightly acidic and strange. But it's not just steam, it's full of minerals: iron, sulfur, calcium, even traces of arsenic. For you, it's dangerous. For the lizard, it's medicine. Its skin, you remember, had that odd velvety texture perfect for absorbing what it couldn't eat. These pools were its pharmacy, its kitchen, its shield. Few predators could tolerate the fumes. Fewer prey could navigate the slick terrain. But Tenebrosaurus, it thrived in this toxicity. Odd fact for the night: there are snails that live directly on hydrothermal vents at the bottom of the ocean. They build shells out of iron sulfide, the same stuff used in building armor plating. Real-life ironclads, just squishier. You wonder now if Tenebrosaurus ever left this chamber, or if this was its heart, its temple, its home. You begin to notice patterns in the stone ripples, almost like tree rings around the vents. Natural, perhaps, or maybe not. The rings are too even, too clean, like something circled them repeatedly. Not for hunting, for something else. Maybe these were rest sites. Maybe this was where the oldest lizards came to dissolve. Not die, just let go. Like the final molt, when even their bones stopped resisting. You lean down beside one of the rings and find something buried in the slime. You pull gently. A jawbone. Small, delicate, polished, human. But that's not what makes you pause. It's the fact that it's placed between two flat stones. Not tossed, not dropped, set. You begin to understand the rhythm now. This wasn't a feeding site. It was a graveyard. Not for prey, for guests. Historians still debate whether ancient humans ventured into these caves willingly. Skeptics point to the lack of tools, weapons, or fire pits. But some fringe researchers argue something darker or stranger. That people came here not to explore but to join. Initiates, pilgrims, or perhaps just those who'd given up on sunlight. There's a theory in some remote cultures that the Earth has rooms for the forgotten. Places where those who no longer belong to the surface can be accepted by the deep. Maybe this was one of them. You sit beside the jawbone and feel the weight of it. Not heavy, just present. It doesn't feel tragic, it feels chosen. That's when you notice the slime around the pool is arranged. In spirals. Again. Always the spirals. Not perfect circles, not chaos. A slow, deliberate curve inward. Like a fingerprint or a path. Odd fact for the night. In some species of cave beetles, life cycles can take decades. Larvae feed once, molt, and then simply wait. Their entire adulthood is spent motionless, waiting for a mate who may never come. They aren't dead, just finished. You wonder if Tenebrosaurus had stages like that. Times when it simply paused. For years, maybe decades. Waiting for the cave to change, for the water to rise, for something to return. And what if you were the thing it was waiting for? Not to kill, to understand? You begin to think the lizard wasn't just shaped by the cave. It became the cave. Its presence, repeated over time, wore grooves into the walls. Its breath altered the air. Its feeding created ecosystems. Its silence, its long, patient silence, became the law of this underground world. And like all kings, it left a legacy. Not children, not bones. Space. A silence that carries meaning. And in your ears now that silence grows. You rise and take one last look at the vents, the rippling pools, the spirals. You don't touch anything. You simply back away. And the air cools again. The smell fades. The heartbeat disappears. But the knowing, that stays with you. You were there, and you were allowed to leave. You climb. Slowly. Hands pressed to slick rock knees, scraping against the cool, damp floor. You rise away from the springs with the caution of someone trying not to wake a god. The tunnels feel narrower now, not physically but spiritually. Like the darkness is folding itself tighter around you, not to trap you but to mark the closing of something sacred. You don't turn on your light. There's no need. You know the texture of this place now. The language of curves and dips. The hum of stone that remembers. Every groove beneath your fingertips whispers a direction and you follow. The silence has changed too. It's no longer menacing. It's full. Like you're moving through a library of memory and the walls are too polite to interrupt. Then all at once the floor dips. Not steeply, just enough to tilt you forward. You slide down a short slope and stumble into another chamber. This one dry, dusty, cracked in places, and the smell gone. No sulfur, no minerals, no ancient breath, just air. Thin, lifeless, and that's when it hits you. The cave is ending. Not right away, but soon. This is where the collapse began. You kneel beside a pile of loose stone, angular, sharp, not yet worn by time. A cave-in, natural, or something else historians still debate, whether the extinction of Tenebrosaurus was due to seismic shifts collapsing their habitats, or if environmental changes simply made their lifelines heat. Moisture prey disappear. But some believe the lizards chose to retreat deeper when the world changed. Chose isolation. Chose silence over compromise. Odd fact for the night. Some species of mole rats will deliberately seal off tunnels behind them when they sense changes in surface pressure. They don't run, they erase the path. You look closer at the cave-in. On one of the stones, faint lines grooves again. Cut deeply. The tail end of a trail. Like someone or something marked it just before it was sealed. Not in panic. In ceremony. Beyond the rockfall, there's no sound. No hint of airflow. No pressure pulse from a warm spring or echo from a larger room. It's the edge. Not of the cave, perhaps, but of the kingdom. You sit on the slope suddenly overwhelmed. Not with fear, with absence. Because now you know what this place used to be, and what it's lost. You can feel the silence grieving. Tenebrosaurus was more than an animal. It was a system, a rhythm, a way of life built entirely around the rejection of light, noise, and haste. It fed slowly, moved slowly, thought if thought is the right word in a language that required centuries to finish a sentence. And now that sentence is almost done. You lean against the wall and close your eyes. For a moment you try to mimic it. The stillness, the restraint. You imagine a creature curling in a tight tunnel, heartbeat down to 2 per minute, ribs rising just enough to let in the cave's breath. You don't need to imagine hard, because you feel it again. That pulse, not yours, not the cave's. Deeper, older, one final lizard, or just the memory of one, you can't tell. And maybe that's the point. Not everything has to be known. Some things only need to be witnessed. You touch the wall one last time and trace a spiral with your finger. Not to mark your way back, but to say goodbye. To acknowledge that you saw and were seen. Odd fact for the night, scientists discovered a cave in Romania completely sealed off for 5.5 million years. Inside, life adapted without sunlight, without outside air, bacteria, scorpions, leeches, all forming a closed ecosystem. Entirely alien. Entirely real. That's what this place feels like now. Sealed. Sacred. Still. You rise and start walking again, following the slope upward. Each step lighter. Each breath less burdened. Behind you, the darkness stays put. Not chasing. Not watching. Just waiting. As it always has. Because deep in these caverns, carved by heat, ruled by stillness, remembered only by stone. Something once lived that never needed to be fast or loud or large. It only needed to last. And somehow it did. You don't realize how far you've climbed until the air starts to taste different. Not better, just familiar. There's a subtle shift in pressure, a faint whiff of surface mold, and the unmistakable scent of decay leaves soil, the broken breath of wind that's touched grass. After so long in stone and steam, it almost makes you dizzy. But the cave isn't quite finished with you. Before the tunnel fully opens, it offers one last detour, a hollow to your left. Narrow, hidden by a ledge of collapsed rock. You wouldn't notice it if you weren't moving as slowly as you are now, listening, breathing, feeling the walls, as if they were speaking directly to your skin. You hesitate, then slip inside. It's a tight squeeze. Your shoulders drag on either side, and for a moment the thought flickers. This is how people vanish. But then the space widens again, just enough for you to crouch. And what you see is a nest. No eggs, no bodies. Just a divot in the stone lined with shedded skin, brittle layers of scale like curled paper charred at the edges. In the center, a pile of stones arranged in a ring encircling something long and pale and softly glowing. A femur, human, worn smooth, nested like a sacred relic. Beside it, a necklace. Beads made of bone. No clasp, just a loop as if it had been pulled off gently, reverently, and laid down. Someone came here. Someone gave themselves to this place. Or were accepted. Historians still debate whether ancient humans were victims, intruders, or something else. One controversial theory suggests a cult of cave dwellers existed in the Ice Age, people who revered eyeless creatures as guides to the underworld. The evidence sparse. A few artifacts, some unsettling burial positions, but always in deep, unlivable caves. This feels like one of those places. You don't stay long. The air is tight, and your pulse is suddenly too loud in your ears. You back out slowly and continue up the main tunnel, each step scraping memory from stone. And then the walls begin to widen. The ceiling lifts, and something new appears. Light, not bright, not full, just a dim shaft slicing through the rock ahead, painting the walls in a soft silver glow. Dust dances in it like the ghosts of old spores. You've reached a skylight, not an exit, but a reminder. The surface exists. You step into the glow and raise your face. You can't see the sky, just a sliver of it, maybe 30 feet up, but the color is unmistakable. Blue. You haven't seen blue in what feels like days. You close your eyes, breathe, and hear a whisper of wind. No words, just movement. But after so much stillness, it feels like applause. You sit in the light, not to rest, to balance. Between two worlds. You remember the chambers, the fossil curled in eternal rest, the bones arranged in reverent spirals, the sleeping one beside the spring. And you realize something. The cave is alive. Not in a magical way. Not in the sense of breath or hunger, but in memory, in rhythm, in shape. Tenebrosaurus didn't just live here. It was the cave. Its body-etched pathways, its breath-filled chambers, its instincts carved a logic into every corner. And when it died, if it died, it left behind not bones but design, like an author leaving margins in a book. Odd fact for the night. There's a theory in deep geology that some cave systems are formed in pulses, not continuously, meaning the Earth doesn't build them slowly, but in sudden chemical events like breaths held and released once every million years. What if the lizard followed the same rhythm? You don't move for a long time, not because you're tired, because you're listening. And down there below you, deeper than sound, is the faintest suggestion of a movement. Not a roar, not a hiss. A shift, like something turning over in its sleep. You rise and keep walking. You're not escaping. You're returning. Different now. Slower. Quieter. Carrying with you the weight of a silence that ruled without eyes, without language, without need. And it gave you something. Not answers, not clarity, but perspective. Because beneath our feet, in places no sun has touched in millions of years, something once lived that didn't fear the dark. It chose it. And maybe deep down so did you. You reach the mouth of the cave just as the light begins to shift, not into day, but into the soft blue hush before it. The surface world is still asleep, unaware of the strange story you now carry inside your skin. You don't step into the open right away. You linger in the threshold halfway between earth and memory. The forest outside is still, not silent, but still. Birdsong hasn't yet begun. Wind stirs leaves softly without urgency. The world up here breathes faster, shallower, as if it doesn't know how to wait the way the cave did. You feel taller now. Or maybe the sky just seems lower. Behind you, stone, slow and quiet, holding secrets like a breath. Ahead, a world that never stopped rushing, and within you, something else entirely. You kneel beside the cave-mouth hand on the moss-covered ground and look at the trail you left behind. It's not much some disturbed gravel, a scuffed patch of lichen, the faint impression of knees pressed into soil. Soon it'll all be gone. But the memory, that stays. You didn't just survive the cave, you became part of it. The blind lizard that ruled its darkest halls is no longer just a fossil, or a theory, or a whisper. It's a presence stitched into you now. You understand stillness. You respect silence. You feel the weight of every sound you make, and every sound you don't. And somewhere deep below, maybe something ancient noticed. Maybe it listened to your heartbeat and found it steady enough. Maybe it let you go because you waited back. Odd fact for the night, scientists have recently discovered that even human bones emit tiny sounds when subjected to stress, pings too high-pitched for us to hear. Our skeletons talk in their own way, even if we never listen. The lizard always listened. It ruled not with vision but with patience. Not with power but with presence. It didn't need to chase you, didn't need to fight, it simply waited for you to reveal yourself. And now, as you step into the forest, branches brushing your shoulders like a curtain parting, you realize you never actually saw it. Not truly, but it saw you, and that's enough. You walk slowly now, not out of fatigue, but out of respect. Because the further you get from the cave, the more the noise returns. Birds, insects, the murmur of distant water. It feels loud, overwhelming even. You miss the hush already. That heavy, sacred darkness. The cave was more than shadow. It was memory. Sapayam was antismenstanse. And silence was its crown. In time, you'll forget some of it. That's natural. But in your quietest moments in elevators and basements in midnight, walks through empty parking garages, you'll feel it again. The weight, the presence, the sense that something ancient is nearby, not hunting, just listening and remembering. So now, as the surface light returns and the air loses its weight, take a moment to let the silence settle in your bones. You've walked with the shadow lizard now. You've traced its grooves, felt its breath, learned its rhythm. You've been part of something most people will never understand, a world where seeing was never required to rule. That's what Tenebrosaurus taught you. It wasn't just a creature, it was a kingdom. One of pressure, mineral breath, and old memory. A slow, coiled thought stretched across centuries of darkness. And maybe, just maybe, it left behind more than fossils. Maybe it left you, because long after the bones rot, and the springs cool and the paintings fade, the silence remains. The grooves stay etched. The logic of patience, of listening, of choosing the dark when the world moves too fast, that's what endures. You carry that now, in your footsteps, in your breath, in the way you'll pause before flipping on a light or entering a quiet room. Not because you're afraid, but because some part of you still hears it. That slow heartbeat in the stone. The one that asked only one thing. Will you wait back